Thanks so much for joining me. As I said, I'm Dr. Shelley Meyer. I am a functional medicine doctor, a family doctor, a registered dietitian. And on this channel, I talk a lot about gut and hormone health. And today we are diving into one of the best tests I find for evaluating people's, not only their reproductive hormone health, like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, but also the neurotransmitters, the vitamins that support this, and cortisol, indicating adrenal overload or underload, meaning chronic fatigue issues, stress, anxiety, all those things can be evaluated partially. It's not the complete solution, but by looking at the Dutch test. So we are going to talk about that today, the Dutch test. And I wanted to ask you if you could hit the subscribe if you haven't yet, if you're interested in these topics, and hit the bell to be notified when I post new videos every week, and like and share if you like these topics in this video. So I help lots and lots of people with their gut and hormone health in my functional medicine practice, and I try to do so in these videos as well. So I'm going to be switching cameras. I will be on my Chromebook and sharing my results from my Dutch test. So we're going to go through all my results from my Dutch test, the most recent one. I've done it quite a few times, and show you the test and tell you what that means. So I need to screen share, so I'm going to be on my computer, so I'll be back. So hey, it's Dr. Meyer again. So I am showing you my Dutch test. So the main screen we're going to look at here, and these are the other pages that are in my chart. So this will be the dashboard that you see with a Dutch test. It shows you dials. So basically, for a female hormone report on the Dutch test, you'll see the postmenopausal range, which is way down here in the purple, and then the kind of in-between range, the lower limit for premenopausal, and then the upper limit for premenopausal. So the main sex hormones here are estrogen and progesterone. We also have testosterone. And then down here you have the cortisol, your stress hormone. So the reason I find this so effective or so helpful, this test, is because it does show me all of these things, as well as some more details I'm going to share with you. And it puts it out in a really easy way to explain. And then it's also pretty easy to collect it. Now, with collecting it, it's a dried urine test. So you do have these little pH papers that you pee on. You do have to read the instructions and make sure that you don't overhydrate that day. There are certain rules on not having fluid within 2 hours of the testing time. So you start on the evening of one day. It's a pretty typical day you want to pick, so that's not like super stressful or way too relaxing to kind of meet your normal criteria. So you want to start with a normal day, and you start usually about 5 o'clock in the evening or just a bit before dinner. And then you try not to have caffeine or alcohol that day. If you have a little bit of caffeine that morning, that's okay. But really, we want the cortisol to be more representative, your stress hormone, of how you are without caffeine. So don't use that. If you can, don't drink caffeine. Don't take any caffeine supplements. Don't take supplements that have green tea extract in them. Also, don't eat a lot of extra sugar that day if you normally don't. But if you normally do, then try to mimic your normal activity, except for the caffeine. Although I guess, you wouldn't really, if you do eat a lot of sugar, you don't really want to overdo it. If you're taking any supplements, it's best to stop them a few days before the Dutch test, but discuss it with your provider. And you do want to avoid for 48 hours before. It's interesting. You want to avoid fava beans, bananas, and avocados, because they can mess with some of the neurotransmitter levels that they test here. If you're on hormones, you're like me on bioidentical hormones, you're postmenopausal, then you can still take them as normal, because we want to test what your body's like on the hormones. But if you're on supplements that kind of mess with your hormones or help correct your hormones or make them more even, your provider probably wants to, I would, with most of my patients, ask them to stop those a couple of days ahead of time. So it all depends. If I know the person really well and I know what their patterns were like before, then I might not. So no alcohol, caffeine, no extra supplements, and try to pick an average day. And then watch your hydration, avoid the bananas, fava beans, and avocados for 48 hours beforehand. And that can be harder than it sounds, because some of my patients do eat bananas and avocados quite a bit. Not really fava beans so much, but it depends on where you live. So I like that it can tell me your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and put it in a way that we can look at it and compare and do maybe repeat testing if the budget allows later to see what kind of progress we've made. And then I like that it has this cortisol curve. Granted, people's cortisol, it's a hormone, it's up and down, it's your stress hormone. It's going to be up and down from day to day. So there's no way that one test like this can totally tell us everything about your cortisol. But it's a peek into what happens over that. Oh, I forgot to say, it starts at 5 o'clock one night. Then you do another test, urinate on a strip about 10 o'clock that night. Then you wake up the next morning. As soon as your eyes pop open, you want to go and urinate on another strip. They do give you an extra one in case you need to go to the bathroom overnight. And you do collect that if you do get up to go to the bathroom. And then the final one is at like 10 a.m. the next morning. So it's really a 17-hour test. But I like that better than a blood test, because a blood test just gives us one point in time. So at least this gives us more markers. And a blood test, when they put that needle in your arm, sometimes it can shoot up the cortisol if you're really anxious about needles. So it might not represent the best, situation, or might not be the best representation of what it normally looks like. So I like it for those reasons. No test is perfect. But so for me, you'll see I am on bioidentical hormones, but you'll see my estrogen, my progesterone, or at least last year, I have corrected it since then, down in the premenopausal, not premenopausal, postmenopause area. When I am working with somebody who's on bioidenticals, I have them continue them during the test, and we usually shoot for something in this arena, but between the postmenopausal and the premenopausal range, or maybe in this low range here. My testosterone's always been good, and I don't supplement or use any testosterone. But the cortisol at this time last year when I did it, I was in kind of having a rough time. And I was surprised that my cortisol wasn't more off, but I did have my nice, what you want to look for is your nice waking response to cortisol, that it goes up and peaks, but not too high, but right in the middle there, and then goes down in the afternoon. Now you see mine's a bit low in the afternoon. I'd rather it stay in between these lines. And then in the night, mine goes up a bit. And I do have chronic insomnia that ebbs and flows. Oftentimes if my other hormones are balanced, my insomnia is pretty good. And I think it was pretty good at this time, but I do have a little bit more of a higher level of cortisol at night. And then you'll see my cortisol, I'd rather it be right in the middle there, but it was on the higher end. And then these dials don't match up. So my 24-hour free cortisol was a little bit high, and my metabolized cortisol was in where I want it to be. So that could be sometimes if your thyroid is not functioning well, this can be another marker for thyroid, that you won't have a good metabolism. You'll have like a under metabolism of your cortisol. So if you see those numbers not matching up well, like this, with this being high and this being lower than that, then you can check out your thyroid levels. So I would ask your doctor to do TSH, free T3, free T4, and thyroid antibodies. Some endocrinologists say, why the free T3 if you do a TSH, but I think you can find benefit in looking for that. So this is a good marker to help with cortisol metabolism. It also looks at DHEA, which let's skip to this page. There's a numbers page in between, but DHEA is here. So I, last year at least, had a low DHEA sulfate, but if I look down at my other breakdown products of DHEA, they were actually okay. So I would consider this a decent DHEA, despite that being low. DHEA can then go through an enzyme called aromatase and then be made into various types of, it can be either made into testosterone or estrogen, estrone. So you don't want too much of that aromatase. You don't want too much of that DHEA. That's why when people take DHEA, because it is available as a supplement, it's kind of uncontrolled. You don't know if it's going to go down to testosterone or estrogen. So you do want your doctor, your provider, to check where it's going and maybe not use it freely without being monitored for your DHEA, because it can go often into testosterone. And then if you take too much of it, you can have, the if you're a woman, have the male characteristics of the deepening voice or acne or kind of testosterone aggression. So be mindful with DHEA and make sure you're tracking your levels and that you're seeing if it's going to testosterone or estrogen. And then another great thing on here is that you can look at the DHEA and testosterone and see if it, or look at your metabolites, which is what we call these numbers here, and see if you're more androgenic. So as a woman, you don't necessarily want to be more androgenic. You don't want that dial to be over in the 5-alpha direction, because that means you tend to form more testosterone. And so if you took something like DHEA or testosterone, it could go more down that pattern. So you want to be mindful of that. You also want to look at your balance of these. Mine are pretty balanced, but they were all low at that time. But what I love about the Dutch test is this pie chart. So we want a healthy estrogen breakdown of this green, of the 2-hydroxy. 4-hydroxy can be harmful, and like you see here, could go down into quinones and be harmful for a DNA. If it's not detoxified, it can be harmful for breast cancer risk or female cancer risk. So mine was pretty good here. My 2-hydroxy was going down the right direction. My 16-hydroxy wasn't too high, and my 4-hydroxy was in the normal range. But then it also looks, so this is the pathway you want it to mostly go down, which is the 2-hydroxy. And then you want it to be methylated, which is part of our detoxification pathway to get hormones. If you don't methylate or the other steps of detoxification, detoxify your estrogen, it can recycle and be a more DNA damaging, more breast cancer causing kind of estrogen, like I was saying here. So you want it to go down this 2-hydroxy pathway, and then you want a methyl group to be added to it for it to be methylated. Mine at that time was low. So my overall estrogen was low anyway, which could make the methylation look low. Those numbers, actually, these dials right here, look pretty even. But this one's a little bit higher than that one. So it did, score me as low methylation. And ways you can help with methylation, if you have an MTHFR defect, which I've talked about in some of my other videos, you may not handle fake folic acid well, so that could impair your methylation. You may need more of methylfolate, a certain type of B vitamin. There are other MTHFRs, not the only gene. SNP, I'm going to talk about gene testing in another video coming up. It's not the only gene, SNP, or abnormality that can make you not methylate well. Sometimes you just don't detoxify well with all the toxins that we get. So you might need to support it with methylated folate or methylated B12 or magnesium. Those are all ways to help that methylation panel. So here, is another good, valuable part of this Dutch test. It's a nice graphic there. And it shows us, what I love is it shows your melatonin levels. So this was, that night I did not take melatonin. So my natural melatonin levels were okay. They used to be really low. And then I did some gentle liquid melatonin for a while and lifestyle changes that I've talked about in my other videos. And I did have some improvement naturally in that. So it's good to have a natural, good amount of production of melatonin naturally. You also have your DHEA, this is just showing you basically coming stress can affect your hypothalamus, pituitary, then, sending messages to the adrenal gland to make more cortisol if there's high stress. Also DHEA could be made. See, mine, I'm pretty balanced between my cortisol and my cortisone metabolites, and you want to see that balance. And my graphs here don't look that much different, and my dials here don't look that much different. So that's good, because sometimes when there's a period of high stress, you can have the body in a kind of saving mechanism trying to help you form more cortisone versus cortisol. So store more of your cortisol. And that's not always great either. You don't want too much cortisol in your system, but you don't want too little either. You don't want too much of it being stored. So there's a good balance here. But if there's not a good balance, then you do sometimes want to work on that, what they're calling here 11 beta HSD. So it measures the balance of cortisone and cortisol metabolites. That can be tricky to work on. Sometimes licorice root can help, but you have to watch out for that, because if you have high blood pressure, it could raise your blood pressure. It can also cause some fluid buildup if not watched. So you do need to be careful with what you're choosing for your 11 beta, manipulation there. But licorice root can be one effective thing. Magnolia as well. Another herb can be helpful too. But those are things you want to explore with the help of a provider that does Dutch tests a lot, because they can help you manipulate that. And you never want to forget that it's not, as I talk about all the time on this channel when I talk about cortisol, it's not just supplements. You really, really need to take a deep dive into your life. Practice mindfulness. I've talked a lot about that on the channel. Meditation, deep breathing, get rid of the stressful people in your life if you can. I mean, obviously you can't bad way get rid of, but the toxic relationships, limiting those. And putting boundaries on your work, not working too much, stepping up for yourself, saying no to overcommitment. All of those things are really important. So even steps as simple as a 5-minute meditation. I love the Calm app. That's a great option in the morning, can make a difference in your cortisol levels and how you feel. So it's really much more important, because supplements will get you this far of the way. Lifestyle change gets you this far of the way in improving your hormone balance and your stress hormone balance in particular. Getting good sleep is important. Low sugar diet, no added sugars. Limiting caffeine, limiting alcohol, all those things are really supportive, and they can't be underestimated as their importance with not only female or male hormones, but also stress hormones. So these are the supporting, and they even have, since I did mine last year, have added another marker for gut, like a sign of gut dysbiosis. It by no means can replace a stool test, a microbiome test, but it's a nice marker to have in there. So that's not on mine, but it is part of it now. So they have B12 markers. I was fine with my methylmalonate, but the higher that methylmalonate goes, that means the more methylated B12 you might need. So that methylation step I was talking about earlier. They have B6 markers. B6 is really helpful in keeping a good hormone balance. And you find if you're on a birth control that B6 can be depleted. So mine was within range. And pyroglutamate is a glutathione marker. And glutathione is really important for detoxification, for keeping a healthy liver, for helping support your hormones, helping support your digestion and detoxification of hormones, getting those toxic stopping the hormones from turning toxic and getting them out of your system in a good way. So that marker looked okay. It looked fine. Then dopamine, one of your neurotransmitters in your brain. So this is another good stress marker. So my dopamine was within my range. My epinephrine marker, VMA, was at the low end of the range, which surprises me because I am usually kind of a more anxious person. So it was at the low end of the range, but it was still normal. Since this test, I've worked a lot on stress and had some better boundaries in my life and had some better work-life balance. And I haven't tested it again, but I feel like it's more balanced. But those are some other markers that can help. Now, when you're on let's say you're on Celexa or Prozac or Zoloft or any of the antidepressants that can manipulate dopamine, norepinephrine, more so the ones that are mixed, like Effexor, some of the newer ones, so many names, Lexapro, they can mess these numbers up a little bit. So make sure you note that when you get this done. The melatonin we've talked about. And then there's another marker called oxidative stress DNA damage. 8-hydroxydeguanosine. That is within normal range on mine. But if I see that high in a patient, I tend to work on their exposure to toxins in the environment, but also their antioxidants, their anti-inflammatory diet, like focus on an anti-inflammatory diet that's high in fiber, high in nutrients. Try to have them eat as organic as possible. Eat high fiber, like I said, to help kind of eliminate. We probably would use some supportive supplements for inflammation and detoxification and antioxidants. So that's another good thing that this test does. So that is my Dutch test. and, the benefits of having a Dutch test. Let me maximize here. Sorry about the camera here. But so I love this test. If you have any questions at all, please drop them in the comments. This test is available through functional medicine providers, and I have found it very helpful. I forgot to mention, though, that gut health is a good place to start when you're suffering with hormone imbalance. You really want your gut to be on target and to be well balanced. They work very synergistically. So if you need help with that, check out my Trust Your Gut course. It is at a reduced price now. And if you join my email list as a subscriber, then you can get a discount coupon. So please check that out in the description down below. Please continue to support the channel, like, share, subscribe. This helps to keep the channel going, and check out my links below if you're interested in the Dutch test. Thanks. I'll see you next week.